exploring our oneness with spirit and each other. Unity Online Radio. Thank you for tuning in for this Unity Partner Program. Unity Online Radio partners with spiritual leaders from organizations whose mission and messages complement Unity's. We are pleased to bring you this program on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
Welcome to Living on Purpose with psychology doctoral candidate Jessie Herriott from Atlanta, Georgia. Are you ready to make a switch? A switch from barely living to living on purpose. During the next hour, you will discover principles to help you live a fully functioning, conscious, and purposeful life. The all is mind, and so are you. Let's live on purpose. Now, here's your host, Jessie Herriott.
Thank you so much, folks, for tuning in today for this episode of Living on Purpose. In this hour, we'll be delving into a bit of personality psychology as we further explore the self and try to offer our listeners some golden nuggets to help you guys fully engage life. Specifically, we're going to discuss what's called the north and south of temperament, as it's described by my guest and many psychologists in the personality psychology field. I'm excited today. And thank you guys again for tuning in. I know some of you are living on purpose by fulfilling your vocation, and if you're driving and listening to this broadcast, definitely turn it up. And you want to go back and download the show again, you can download it for free, and it's compatible with any of your audio devices. We're going to go ahead and get started, and welcome to the show today. Our guest, she is the author of Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. I'm joined today by New York Times best-selling author and 2012 TED Talks presenter, Susan Cain. Susan, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you doing, Jessie?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule today. I know your schedule is extensive from what I've heard from your publicist. We just want to jump right in. Your book is phenomenal. I definitely have to say that. I can't stop reading it, and it's so thick. You know, there's so much information. Sometimes you pick up a book and you could just read right through it, but some books require studying. I know this will definitely be one of the requirements in personality psychology after a while. But just to jump right in, for our listening audience, could you tell them a bit about yourself and your background?
Sure, yeah, because I actually came to this through kind of a funny background. You know, I always say that I was born to be a writer and I was born to be a psychologist, both those things, but it took me a while to get there. I actually, for a long time, practiced corporate law, of all things.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and you know, and I'm glad in retrospect that I did that because it gave me, it just gave me a window into a world that I think I never would have known or understood without that, and also it gave me a sense of how you think in a field like corporate law that the people who would be really good at it would necessarily be extroverts. You know, they'd be very bold, they'd be very gregarious, they'd be very comfortable in the spotlight. And I had the sense when I first started practicing that I would be at a disadvantage because I really am none of those things. But I started to realize as I looked around at my colleagues that really more than half of them were introverts, which actually is not so surprising because the latest statistics show that half of Americans are introverts, believe it or not.
Wow.
And, you know, and I saw that all these people were like, they were doing their own sort of quiet, thoughtful thing, and that made them really effective. And it made me start to realize that we have this bias where we think that the right way to be is to be very extroverted, but there are actually two right ways of being. You know, you can be an extrovert and you can be an introvert, and it's all cool. It's all good. The only thing that's not good is that our society is set up in such a way that we think that we should all be extroverts.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. Now, for our listeners, Susan, can you define introverts and extroverts more? Take us there as far as what introverts and extroverts really is. A lot of people assume that introverts are more shy and more docile. Is that really how you define introverts and extroverts, so those that are more outgoing and?
Well, it's a good question. These categories get kind of loose, even in the hands of personality psychologists. But basically, what introversion and extroversion are, it depends. It's a function of how you respond to stimulation. So introverts prefer environments that are a little less stimulating, and I don't mean less interesting. I just mean like less noise thrown at them. Less social stuff thrown at them, just less bombardment in general. And they feel most alive and most switched on when things are a little quieter and a little more mellow. Whereas extroverts feel, for their part, more energized when they're in more hyper environments. And so this is why people often think, introversion means antisocial or asocial, and it's not that at all. Introverts are just as likely to be warm or loving as anybody else, but they prefer to interact with close friends or with family or with people who they know well. They're not as excited about going to a big party and meeting a whole bunch of strangers because that's just a more stimulating thing to do.
Right.
Now, some introverts are also shy. Some extroverts are too. Shyness is about the fear of social judgment. But plenty of introverts are not shy at all. They're not worried about what people think of them. They would just rather be in quiet.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. And when I think about yes, I apologize about that. When I think about what you said, I have to admit that I am definitely an introvert myself, and I do prefer those quiet, more less outgoing events. When you're out in public and people want to go to parties or want to go sometimes to the grocery store. Sometimes you'd rather just sit back and relax and read a book. How do you find a balance when you are an introvert? Are there times when you have to break out of your shell, or what do you suggest for some of our listeners that are trying to, in a sense, find their balance in this noisy world?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and what I suggest is it's based on the work of a personality psychologist named Brian Little, who I profile in my book. He talks about the need that we all need to sometimes step outside our own characters for the sake of work that we love or people that we love. So, if, let's say, well, I'll take my own example for a minute. I wrote this book, right? And I spent 7 years researching and writing and thinking, and that was all blissful for me as an introvert to do that. But now the book came out in January, and the last months of my life I have been spending going on TV and going on the radio. And that's not natural to me, but I do it for the sake of this thing that I love. I really care about the book, and I care about the ideas in the book, so I kind of push myself a little bit outside my comfort zone, to do those things. I think people get into trouble when they are pushing themselves outside their comfort zone for purposes that are not that high to them, Maybe they're in a job they don't really like that forces them to act like extroverts, and that doesn't help. Also, it's really crucial, even if you're pushing yourself for the sake of something you love, it's crucial to still honor who you are and return to yourself at the end of the day. So, like in my case, on my book tour, I schedule in breaks all the time. And my publicist at my publishing house knows this about me, and she's really good about making sure I have breaks in between interviews and giving me time to myself. And that's so crucial. And people, until you really, truly feel entitled to be who you are, you're less likely to schedule those breaks in for yourself. So you have to start with a sense of self-awareness and self-entitlement, really.
Wow, that's amazing. You actually said a mouthful. Listeners, I hope you are definitely taking notes. If you can't, like I said, go back and download the show. This is getting good. I'm personally enjoying this because I am very much so an introvert. And sometimes what I'm finding out, you can let me know about your experiences and your research, but when you're an introvert and you're around people that are either, more extroverted than you or extremely introverts, extremely extroverts, you elevate their extrovertedness. They seem more like they're on the opposite end of the spectrum because my wife is extroverted, and because I'm an introvert, it stirs up her extrovertedness. If that makes sense.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah. And I often think that introverts and extroverts are drawn to each other. My husband's an extrovert also. And
oh, wow.
Yeah, and I think it often really works. But don't you also feel when you're with an extroverted friend or with your wife, don't you feel sometimes like you're a little bit off the hook because they're doing so much of the talking that it kind of carries it for both of you? And I don't think it's good if that happens too much. But I'm sorry.
Right. No. Exactly.
Yeah. I notice this sometimes. Like I'll be on a. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. We're talking at the same time here. No, you go ahead. Okay.
So I was just going to say, I notice sometimes I'll be, let's say, on a long car trip with my husband, and and already like 4 or 5 or 6 hours of driving have gone by, and he still has not run out of things to say. It's amazing to me, and it's not like he has to try. And I love that about him because if it were up to me and somebody else like me, like we might really run out after a while. I think for and I think for his part, he likes my energy, which is more sort of centering to him. So I really think that when these relationships work well, they work really well.
Right. That's amazing as well. Now, in your book, you talk specifically about how you've trained different types of people for over 10 years. And specifically, you reference that you help some of your clients figure out their natural personalities and their natural state, that centering area that all of us share, and how to make the most of that. One of your clients you mentioned in the book was someone named Laura. Could you tell us a brief bit about that story?
Yeah, Laura, although I don't want to spoil, there's sort of a surprise ending to that story, and maybe I won't tell you the surprise ending because, if your listeners read the book, I don't want to ruin the surprise for them.
Oh, yeah.
But I'll just tell you that Laura was my very first client, and she was also a lawyer and went out to do her first big negotiation in this really scary environment filled with intimidating-looking investment bankers, Laura was kind of shy and she was kind of quiet and really would have preferred not to be there at all. But she was able, after a while, to turn the whole situation around somehow just by being her own quiet self. Other people were raising their voices and she never raised hers. Other people were pounding the table and instead she would ask questions, constructive questions. And she had really done her homework and she had really prepared, which is something many introverts do for difficult situations like a big negotiation. And over time, having done all these things, it kind of shifted the energy in the room until everybody was acting in a more constructive way and they were able to get a deal done. And so much so, she did such a good job that the bankers on the other side of the table, who she hadn't been representing, that they started sending business to her. And asking if she would represent them the next time because they said they actually wanted someone with this quieter and more constructive approach. And, and I think stories like that can be real breakthroughs because they're so different from the model that we're usually presented, that the way to be effective is to be the loudest, the most like Donald Trump, the one with the most swagger, the one with the loudest voice, all these things. They're not necessarily; those are not always the ways to success.
Wow, that's amazing. I have another question, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. So I want to ask this one. What are some of the advantages, you were going into them in your last statement, but what are some of the advantages of being an introvert for those that are? Because like you said, over half of Americans are introverts, and they might not realize it because of the culture that's imposed on them to be so much outgoing, and, those that are more outgoing make the most money and are the most successful and are the happiest. What are some of the advantages of being an introvert?
Yeah, it's so important that we understand it because there really are so many. If you look at who most of the really creative people have been in history, you almost always find, psychologists have studied this, and they almost always find that they are people with serious introverted streaks. People like Stephen Wozniak, who invented the first Apple computer, Charles Darwin, Dr. Seuss. Would you have guessed that Dr. Seuss was an introvert? So much that he created all those amazing characters sitting by himself in a bell tower in the back of his house in California. He was kind of all alone day after day creating these characters, and was afraid to meet the young children who read his books because he thought that they would expect him to be this sort of jolly Santa Claus-like figure, and would be disappointed that he was more of a quiet guy. But the fact is, it's often quiet guys and gals who do creative things because solitude is such a crucial ingredient of being creative. And I think if you're an introvert listening to this, you probably know this deep down. You know, you probably know that when you go off by yourself or when you sit or think quietly, you know, that you have access to original modes of thought that are not available to you when you're kind of out in the hubbub. So,
oh, wow, that's amazing, Susan. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we have to take a quick commercial break. And
sure.
Listeners, if you are listening, please hold on and stay tuned. I'm Jesse Herriott talking today with Susan Cain, New York Times bestselling author. When we return, continue the conversation with Susan Cain right here at Unity.fm. Stay tuned.
It takes you to power Unity Online Radio. If you'd like to make a positive difference in the world, you can by contributing to this global ministry. Unity Online Radio relies on listener support to broadcast the messages of unity to an awakening world. To contribute, visit www.unity.fm and click on Donate Now.
Hi, this is Ellen Davenport. The 5 Principles was my first book, and here's what I've learned as an author. It's nice to sell a lot of books, but it's truly gratifying to know the book is being read, used, and studied in churches and small groups in the U.S. and beyond. And I get a real kick out of hearing that someone gave the 5 Principles to friends who aren't in Unity. Because the 5 Principles are universal spiritual laws. They operate in everyone's life, whether they know it or not. They've been discovered and rediscovered by spiritual masters for thousands of years. God is all there is. We are expressions of God. We create our experience with the power of our thoughts. We align ourselves with the well-being of the universe through prayer and meditation. And we live the truth we know every day in every decision. Just 5 Principles. They cover it all. Buy the book at unity.org.
You've seen reality TV. Well, now get ready for reality radio. It's raw, unpredictable, and completely unscripted. You Can Heal Your Life follows the lives of 4 people each season as they face their fears and overcome their challenges. Tune in weekly and follow along as they take each faithful step on their journey. Learn what it takes to really heal your life. Dr. Chris Michaels shows you how to expect specific and measurable results from prayer. He says, we must place a demand upon consciousness. We don't hope to get what we pray for. We expect it. As a 25-year veteran in the New Thought movement, Dr. Chris has helped thousands of people find their way to success and healing. His faith is unshakable, and his commitment to helping others heal through the power of prayer is extraordinary. Don't miss Reality Radio. You Can Heal Your Life with Dr. Chris Michaels. Live Mondays at 11 a.m. Central Time on Unity Online Radio.
You've been listening to Living on Purpose with Jesse Herriott. If you have a question or comment about today's broadcast, or if you'd like to join in the discussion, friend us on Facebook at Jesse Herriott or email us at livingonpurpose@unity.fm. Now, more Living on Purpose.
And we're back talking today with New York Times bestselling author and 2012 TED Talks presenter Susan Cain. I'm Jesse Herriott, and this is Living on Purpose. Now, Susan, when we left off, we were getting into the heart of your research. And what I want to ask is, in the book, you mentioned something about shifting from being a culture of character to a culture of personality and some of the side effects of that shift. Could you elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, this was one of the most interesting things that I found when I started researching my book. So it turns out that we went through a kind of cultural revolution at the turn of the 20th century, and it's weird to say that because you'd think if there were a cultural revolution, we would all know about it. But somehow no one talks about it. We shifted from a culture of character to one of personality, and what happened is. We suddenly had the rise of big business. So before this, people had been living in small towns in agricultural economies. They'd been working alongside people they knew all their lives. And so what really mattered was what kind of person you were. Were you a good person? Did you help out your neighbor? That kind of thing. You could be a quiet, reserved guy, but if you were the one helping out your neighbor, everybody loved you. But then suddenly people start moving to the cities, and now they have to stand out in a crowd of strangers who don't really know who they are. So what starts to matter more are more superficial qualities, like how charming are you, how charismatic are you, how magnetic are you, how dominant are you when you come into a room, do people feel your presence? That's what started to matter, and that was the culture of personality. The cultural historian Warren Sussman says suddenly all Americans became preoccupied with becoming a performing self. We were suddenly all performers. And it was during this time that Dale Carnegie famously wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People, a book which, by the way, more than 75 years later, it's still number 200 on Amazon, last I checked. So, we still live in this culture of personality today.
Right. And just it's funny that you mentioned that. I was just reading that book, and it seems like the culture that we're in is really heavily on sales and presenting yourself and being the best speaker and having that silver tongue. And that concept has been around for a while. Now, how does what you're talking about, how does this help us in choosing our vocations and discovering our callings? Finding the right thing that fits us, because in some cases, we are those that are introverts were put in situations where we have to become extroverted all the time, and we don't have that space, to work independently and operate from our core. And then you have those that are on the opposite end of the spectrum where they are extroverted by nature and they're crammed in a little cubicle, because it seems like a lot of companies are turning things into cubicle nation. Exactly.
Yeah, and what I say to people is that just as carefully when you're thinking about a new job or a new career, you evaluate very carefully how much money are you going to make, how much will they pay you, what kind of health insurance benefits will you get, retirement benefits, how good a commute are you going to have. You evaluate all that stuff pretty carefully, but you should now add to your list what kind of does this job suit my temperament. Because that is huge. If it does not suit your temperament, you are not going to be happy. There's just no way. Now, this doesn't mean, however, that let's say you're an introvert, it doesn't mean you have to, that the only jobs available to you are, let's say, to be a writer like me or, a computer programmer or something sort of stereotypically introverted. One of the things I did in my book is I profiled introverts who are really successful in careers where you wouldn't expect it. There's one guy who I profiled named John Berghoff. He's a big salesman. He's a record-breaking salesman, and he uses his introverted style of asking questions and being quiet and tuning into other people's wavelengths to really know what his sales prospects want, and he's able to sell to them in really effective ways. So there are ways to do it, but you have to start from a place of recognizing who you are and operating from that place. And also, it is very helpful for introverts to choose work that they really love, as we were saying before, because, for the sake of work you love, you will more easily be able to stretch outside yourself when you need to.
This is amazing. Now, Susan, just to follow up on that, is there a spectrum, or are there, just strictly introverted people and strictly extroverted people?
No, that's a good question. Nobody is all introvert or all extrovert. No one at all. And some people really are kind of smack in the middle of the introvert-extrovert spectrum, and they feel like, really, truly am not one or the other. But I think most people feel like they kind of know who they are. They're more one way than the other. But we still all have a taste of what it's like to be the other. I mean, like you say you're an introvert, but I'm sure you've had experiences where you've been to a party and you're really enjoying yourself and you like everybody there, and maybe you feel like staying out all night and partying or whatever. So that's not a stereotypical introvert thing, but we all do that. And vice versa. Extroverts have their days when they like to just sit alone in a library. So we all know what it's like to be the other side. And I think that's important too, because it gives us the empathy that we need to understand people who are quite different from ourselves.
That's amazing. Now, what are some of the signs that can help us determine where we are on the spectrum? Because you talk about that in your book as well.
Well, in some ways, the biggest sign you can ask yourself is, now imagine you're at that party. Let's say it's a party where you're having a really good time. You've been there for 2 hours. In general, do you feel after that 2 hours like, okay, I had a good time and now I'm sort of itching to go home and be back in my pajamas? Or do you feel like, this is so great, I want to go to another party now? Or, stay at this one all night. If you're more in the latter group, that's more of an extrovert thing, because extroverts feel energized by this kind of outing. Introverts, even if they enjoy it, they feel more depleted, and so they want to go off and recharge by themselves. So that's one sure sign. And another one you can ask yourself is, in general, do you like to think before you speak, or do you tend to think out loud? That's a really classic difference between the two.
And all of this information is very useful, folks, because, again, it helps you to engage life more fully. You can operate from your authentic self because, again, we're bombarded by media and we live in a culture where it's pushing us to be more expressive. And when you operate from your center, you're more effective in what you do. Now, also... Yeah,
in fact, I would say... Sorry, can I interrupt you with one thing?
Yes, go ahead. Anytime, yes.
In fact, one of the things I write about in Quiet is that you need to find, and I show you in the book how to do this, you need to find what I call your sweet spot. And your sweet spot is, it's the place where you are getting your optimal zone of stimulation for you, right? So, one person needs to really be out and about to feel energized, and the other person needs a lot less. So you need to be thinking, like, really, every day of your life, think, am I in my sweet spot now? Or am I too bored? Or am I too overwhelmed, too overstimulated? Check in with yourself and make adjustments based on that. The more you're in your sweet spot, the more energized you'll be, the more you'll get done, the happier you'll be, the more loving you're going to be to the people around you. It's just sort of untold benefits.
Right, and this is a lot of work, and in fact, it keeps us occupied for those that like to meddle on the outside, in other people's affairs, because there's a lot going on within us, and it can help us to function better. Let's talk a bit about processing, because you mentioned that in the book, and our emotions. Do introverts and extroverts process things differently? Do we process stimuli the same, or?
Well, by emotions, you mean? I guess what I'd say is there's a subset of introverts who are known as highly sensitive, and they tend to be extremely sensitive to stimuli, let's say like lights and noise, but they also are more sensitive to emotional events in general. So when something happens, they feel it very intensely. They say that they can often pick up the mood in a room the minute they enter it, even if nobody has said anything. And this has its pluses and its minuses. It can feel too much sometimes to be that sensitive. It also means, though, that these people describe themselves as being very sensitive to kind of the acute beauties of life. So they listen to the Moonlight Sonata and they feel like overwhelmed by the beauty of the music. So it's that kind of sensitivity too. It tends to come in all one package, like everything in life, and like all personality traits. There are upsides and downsides to it.
In your book, you also mentioned about an interview with Dr. Carl Schwartz. For those that are listening, he's the director of, correct me if I'm wrong, developmental. He works at the Developmental Neuroimaging Lab at Massachusetts General Hospital, right?
Yep, part of Harvard Medical School. That's right.
And some of his work studies certain areas of the brain that are involved in thinking and processing, if I'm describing it right. And what role did he suggest in your book different areas of our brain, like the amygdala and all of that, play as far as our processing of the stimuli that you talked about?
Yeah, so this is really interesting. Basically, what Carl Schwartz did, and also his mentor Jerome Kagan, who was one of the great psychologists of the 20th century, they figured out that some babies are born with a temperament that predisposes them over time to be more sensitive, to be more shy, to be more introverted, and you can see this from the minute these babies are born. Like if you give them sugar water to suck on, they will suck more vigorously on the sugar water because they're reacting more to the stimulus of the sugar in their mouths. And as these babies grow older, they approach problems in a more sort of careful, more thoughtful, more analytical manner. Like puzzles that you give them to solve. What Carl Schwartz did is he took these same babies who Jerome Kagan had been studying from the time they were infants. He took them, now they're 20 years old, and he has them come into his lab at Harvard and puts them in an fMRI machine where he can scan their brains. And while he's doing this, he shows them pictures of faces of strangers. And what he finds is that these people now grown up, when they're looking at a stranger's face, the amygdala, which is the organ in your brain that makes you feel shy or processes negative emotions, that the amygdala becomes more active as they're looking at these faces. So a lot of these people, they're now 20 years old. Many of them are quite socially skilled. They have lots of friends. They don't really seem shy when you meet them on the surface, but there's still something in deep in their brain that is reacting more than somebody else would. And I found this so revelatory because I know this is my experience, and I think it's true of many people who were shy as children. As a child, you're very shy. Later on, you kind of feel like you've outgrown it more or less, and you appear as direct in social company as anybody else, but you often feel as if there's some like vestige of it that never really leaves you. Something that always makes you a little more cautious. And so this work has shown that what that something is. And I found it incredibly useful just as sort of a tool for self-understanding. And you can actually, there's another part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is the more sort of thinking, deliberative part of your brain. And you can actually use that part of your brain to talk your amygdala down. So like when you meet somebody at a cocktail party, if you're a formerly shy child, probably what's happening is your amygdala is having like a split-second reaction of, oh my God, let's get out of here.
Right.
But then your prefrontal cortex is saying to your amygdala, that's okay, don't worry, we've been in this situation before, it's always fine, we like meeting new people, don't worry about it. And the amygdala sort of quiets down. But it's helpful to know that all of that is kind of going on under the surface every time you shake your hand, every time you extend your hand to meet somebody.
Wow. The situation that you're describing, I keep saying myself because I know those of you that are listening, if you are introverts, you've probably been in a situation like that, or you've noticed other people that have similar personalities around you that have been in situations like that. Now, how do we understand each other? Because you also talk about, difficulties with introverts and extroverts understanding each other, and also how do we, resolve differences amongst each other? Because we hinted at earlier, we process stimuli different.
Yeah, and so the first thing that introverts and extroverts need to do is really to understand we really are different, and that's okay, and that's legitimate. In fact, in my book, I have a personality test that you can take to figure out how introverted or extroverted you are. And it's always interesting to me. People take the test, and then they say to me, I felt the answers so strongly that I can't even imagine that another person could answer them differently. And that's, so an extrovert can't imagine how you could give the introvert's answers and vice versa. So the first step is we really do need to imagine life can look really, really different through the eyes of someone with a different temperament from my own. And then once you do that, you start making the allowances that you need to. So, in a relationship, let's say the extrovert gives the introvert the time that they need to go off and recharge by themselves. But the introvert also has to understand that the extrovert has true social needs and that they don't feel good. They don't feel alive. They don't feel loved. They don't feel energized if those social needs aren't getting met. So the introvert needs to figure out, okay, how can I either meet those social needs myself, or how can we together build up a kind of lifestyle where the extrovert's going to be able to go out with their friends or do whatever they need to do to feel that sense of being alive. And once you understand that these requests that we make of each other are legitimate, it goes such a long way to coming up with creative solutions.
Wow, this is rich. And what do you think, in your opinion, because you talked about this as well in the book. I'm pulling heavily from the book, by the way, and I am thumbing through it. This is a great piece of work here on the personality psychology in that field.
You.
What trips us up as introverts, or those that are introverts? What trips us up socially? Because you talk about, you give a case of a person named John Berghoff. Not to give too many spoilers, guys. You definitely got to get this book. But John Berghoff was a stereotypical introvert, and you talked about him in comparison to someone else who's an expert salesman. What trips us up socially?
Well, excuse me, for those of us who are shy, that's the ultimate trip up, right? Because when you're shy, you're all focused on the fact that people are thinking bad things about you. So if you are that person, and I'm historically shy about public speaking, so I had to really work on it. And the way around this is you need to do what's called desensitization, which means that that sounds really fancy, but it's not.
Yeah.
All it means is that you expose yourself to the thing that you're afraid of in very small, very manageable doses. So in the case of public speaking, you don't try to address a room full of 200 people at work where it really matters. Instead, you do something like what I did. Like I joined Toastmasters, which is this worldwide organization where you meet with your local chapter of fellow people who are trying to learn public speaking, and you practice once a week or once every 2 weeks. And you're in this environment that's really safe, really supportive. It doesn't matter if you screw up. You could go to the front of the room and forget all your lines, and your voice can tremble, and you can shake and sweat, and it does not matter because nothing's riding on it. And you do that enough times when it goes well that you start to overcome your fear. You don't overcome it forever, but you don't overcome it completely. Is what I mean. But
Susan,
but
I'm
it's
sorry
better
to
enough.
Right on. We have to go to a commercial break. This information is great, and we're going to pick back up when we come back. I'm Jesse Herriott, talking today with Susan Cain, New York Times bestselling author. When we return, we'll continue the conversation.
Hi, my name is Lynn Twist. I'm the author of The Soul of Money. If you're struggling right now with a financial crisis, I recommend going to www.unity.fm and listening to our course about the soul of money and how to handle this in a way that brings out the deep spirituality that's available at this time. A crisis is a terrible thing to waste.
Join author Lynn Twist for the blessing of the financial crisis. You'll learn new techniques to use the current economic situation to redefine your relationship with money. It's available now for immediate download at unity.fm in the video download section.
Imagine world peace. What would it look like? Is it really possible? If so, how do we get there? Author Mindy Odland asked 21 visionary peace builders these questions in Let It Begin With Me, new from Unity Books. Hear from leaders who are creating and living the new peace paradigm, including Barbara Marx Hubbard, Dr. John DeMartini, Azim Kamisa, and His Holiness Karma Kuchen Rinpoche. From the kitchen table to the boardroom, local communities to world nations, each interview offers a unique viewpoint of the new peace movement. You can join this new movement of modern peace builders. Bring peace to every aspect of your life. Discover the role you play. Read Let It Begin With Me, 21 Voices of the New Peace Movement. Imagine and help create world peace. Read Let It Begin With Me by Mindy Odland, available in print and for your e-reader at unitybooks.org.
You've been listening to Living on Purpose, where psychology meets spirituality. Now, here is your host, Jesse Herriott.
And we're back talking today with New York Times bestselling author and 2012 TED Talks presenter Susan Cain. I'm Jesse Herriott. Thank you for listening to Living on Purpose. And again, if you've missed the first half of the show, please go to www.unity.fm and download the show. It is free and compatible with any of your audio devices. And for those of you that are listening on your jobs, don't get in trouble. But stay tuned. This is some good information. Now, before we went to the break, Susan, you were talking about exposing yourself in small doses. It reminded me of a quote that Michael Beckwith said. He said that when you feel the fear, recognize you shouldn't, leave it, and you shouldn't negate that emotion, but take it with you, because it's not going to go away. And what happens is when you're doing what you're afraid of and you get out there and start doing it, it transmutes itself into energy and, positivity, and you get enthused,
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah, and in fact, one of my public speaking teachers said to me, he was like, don't try to get over your fear. Only 3 people in the world have ever managed to conquer fear, and they all live in Tibet. You're not going to be one of them. So, I love that. But, I will say, for a person who really, really is in the grip of a public speaking phobia or another social phobia, hearing those words is actually kind of annoying. I know this because there's fear and there's fear, and there is a certain amount of fear that is so overwhelming that it's not helping you, and it's not like you can just take it with you and use it. So for listeners out there, if you feel like you're in that place, you need to, listen to the part that we talked about already, and there's some more in my book, but you need to be doing the desensitization training, but just starting it at a really, really small and manageable level, and maybe for you practice speaking, let's say, to just one other person at a time. The key is that you need to practice at anxiety levels that you can handle, because what happens in your brain is if you are functioning at a level where your brain is just overwhelmed by anxiety, it kind of shuts down, and you encode in your brain a cycle of shame and fear that is not going to help you for the next time. So that's why I say the key is manageable doses, and you have to figure out what's manageable for you.
Right, that's amazing, and you have to do it, even if, you hear those stories about, I'm from the South, and for those that are in the Bible Belt, you probably know what I'm talking about. Those people that are in ministerial positions, they talk about when they were a kid, they used to pull the little animals together and pull the empty chairs out, and they always wanted to do what they're doing, so they used to just talk to the animals and talk to the empty chairs and pretend people were there, just to get that notion of practice in that you're referring to.
Yeah, God, that's so funny. I've heard about those kinds of stories too, and that's always utterly amazing to me because I'm an introvert, so I'm not the kind of person who ever sought to do that. For me, it's much more like I have to do it to get my ideas out, and so it's worth it for that. Although I will, having said all that, actually, I actually have met a subset of introverts who really are not only comfortable with public speaking, but they really like it. And sometimes they will say that public speaking for them is a comfort zone in a way that chatting with a person at a cocktail party is not. So, these things manifest differently for different people.
I have a question. I want to talk about parenting styles, but before I get to that, I know parents are going to love this. This is going to help them out. What about our needs for a downtime? We hinted on that a bit early in the conversation, but, when you're an introvert versus an extrovert, sometimes extroverts don't understand, the introvert's need for downtime. It's after processing all of that information. Can you talk a bit about that? Because you mentioned that in the book as well.
Yeah, sure. God, introverts really do need it. After introverts have been out there, thinking or doing or speaking or acting, they need desperately time to recharge. And often that's time that happens all by themselves, or sometimes it could happen in the company of someone who they know really well. But basically, it's time to just not be on. And the reason this is so important is because the more you get this time, actually, the better you will be once you're on again. The more love you're going to have to give, the more energy you're going to have to give to the people around you, the more thought power you're going to have to give to the problems you need to solve. It's so key. And, in fact, it's funny. You mentioned I was just speaking at the TED conference a few weeks ago, and I was one of the first speakers, so after I spoke, people were telling me that they were then giving themselves permission to go back to their hotel rooms for an hour or two a day instead of networking their way through the day. And they said that was helping them so much because then when they would come back to network, they were so much fresher. And I think that we often don't give ourselves that permission because we feel so guilty about it. We feel like it's not what we're supposed to be doing.
Right.
This is a kind of no downtime society, and that's not in anybody's interest.
And that conference is actually viral. You've had about 1.3 million downloads since it went live in March, right? Something like that.
I think it's up to 1.7 now.
1.7.
Yeah. it's been crazy. We're beyond what anybody ever expected. But I think it's because this what that talk does, or what the book does, is it gives people permission to think and talk about things that they have felt all their lives and never felt comfortable saying. That there's a part of me that wants to be quiet. There's a part of me that sometimes feels shy, and that's okay. And that many of the great, creative minds and the great leaders of our times have been the same way. And one of the things I do in the book is I take you through the stories of transformative leaders like Gandhi and Rosa Parks and Eleanor Roosevelt, people who were described as quiet and as shy, and they used that personality style as a source of strength instead of the other way around.
We have a couple minutes left in the show. Before we end, can we talk about parenting for those of you that are parents and you're listening to this information and digesting it, and it's good for yourself, and now you're looking at your child. They may be young, they might be old, and you're trying to understand them, and God knows we all go through our changes when we hit that puberty moment. What are some tips and advice you can give parents that are, trying to help their child, come into who they are, and they're not sure where they are on that scale?
Yeah, and this is so important. If you sense that you have an introverted child, I hope, even if you don't read the whole book, I hope you'll read the chapter that I have just on how to parent your child, because it's so key, because these children are often very misunderstood. And so what you need to do, I'll just give you a few quick tips. Number one, it's really important for any child to find the thing that they're passionate about doing and to gain a sense of mastery. But it's especially important for introverted kids because through the things they love to do, they will start to get to know other kids who like to do these things, other kindred spirits, and it's like the social life sort of flows for them through the place of passion. So that's one thing. Another is, and this is so key, let your kids take the time that they need to get comfortable with doing new things. So you do want to encourage them and cajole them, to push through their fears or their inhibitions, but make sure you're doing it at their own pace. And I'm just going to give you an example. Imagine you have a kid who is afraid of learning to swim, and you're the parent, and you see, well, all the other kids in the neighborhood are going to this big group class, and so my kid should be able to do it too. But maybe that's too much for your kids. So maybe what you do instead is give them a private lesson at the pool when nobody else is there. So it's just a quiet pool and they're alone with the instructor, an instructor who they trust. And then they learn to swim that way. And once they have the mastery, then they can go back to the pool with all their friends and splash around, in a loud, noisy pool. But trying to get them to learn in that environment might backfire for them. So take your child for who they are and let them go at their own pace.
And that's amazing. Susan, this has been a wonderful conversation, and thank you so much for your time. And folks, if you are listening, please download the show. Like I said, it will be great for your library, and it will help you to understand who you are. And Susan, real quickly, Carl Jung talks about our contrasexual nature, the anime and animus. Could that kind of sort of be comparable to the introvert-extrovert? Because if so, that means both of these qualities are within us. So whether you're an introvert or not, you still need to cater to both aspects of who you are, right?
Yeah, I think that's true. And Carl Jung also said he said there's no such thing as a pure introvert or a pure extrovert. He said such a man would be in a lunatic asylum. So we all have some introvert and extrovert in us, and for most of us, it's the introvert in ourselves that is going undernourished, and so. So I hope you'll have the strength to go nourish it. And I also want to say, I have, if you want to kind of continue this kind of conversation, I have a blog that is thepowerofintroverts.com. So there's a lot more up there as well, as well as in the book, of course.
Yes, and folks, you can get this book online where books are sold and in your favorite bookstore. Thanks again, Susan, for your time and for the work you're doing. You're truly making a difference in helping us understand who we are. Her latest book, Quiet, The Power of Introverts in the World That Can't Stop Talking, is available, like I said, in bookstores worldwide. You can follow Susan online via Facebook or Twitter or directly at thepowerofintroverts.com. That's our show for this week, guys, and thanks again for tuning in to Living on Purpose at Unity.fm Radio. This program is made possible by the generous support of listeners like you. To make a contribution to Unity Online Radio and help sponsor this broadcast, just go to unity.fm and click on Contribute. Thanks again. This has been Jesse Herriott encouraging you to live on purpose.
Thank you for tuning in to Living on Purpose, where psychology meets spirituality with Jesse Herriott. Listen in live every Tuesday at 9 a.m. Central Time for more insights into psychology, ancient wisdom, and how it connects to your life today. Living on Purpose, only on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world. This program is brought to you in part by www.jesseherriott.com, where psychology meets spirituality. Connect with us on Facebook and YouTube. Keyword search Jesse Herriott.
God is formless, yet takes many forms. What goes around comes around. Chant the name of the Lord and be free. No one comes to the Father except through me. Ever been confused by the variety and apparent contradiction within world religions? Join Reverend Paul John Roach every Tuesday for insight into those principles held in common by all the great religious traditions in world spirituality, exploring the unity within all cultures and faith traditions. Using discussions, interviews, humor, insight, and practical advice, we will clarify the confusion and reveal simple yet profound truths. Call in with your questions and ideas and help break down the barriers that separate us from one another. That's World Spirituality with Paul John Roach, Tuesdays at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, here on Unity FM, the voice of an awakening world.
Inspiration only takes a moment. If you are able to safely turn your attention away from the demands of your activities, quiet your mind and affirm, there is a divine plan at work in my life. I now relax, let go, and let it unfold. Listen attentively, inwardly, without projecting any thoughts about what you think should happen or be experienced. Become as a child, trusting and receptive to the guidance of Spirit within.
This meditative moment, adapted from Mary Kupferle's God Will See You Through, is brought to you by Unity.
You have a good life and are grateful for it. But what if you stretched beyond good and shifted to amazing? Join Reverend Temple Hayes, Senior Minister of the First Unity Campus in St. Petersburg, Florida, as she guides you on a journey to an amazing life. Transcend the need for acceptance of others and be an example of living the truth. Empower your life and fully express the wondrous energy, love, and joy you hold in your wildest imagining. Joyfully and actively know that more important than what happens after you die is the deeper and enriching concern for what happens while you're living. How can you experience an amazing life right now? Learn how each week on From Good to Amazing. Mondays at 4 p.m. Central Time, right here on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
Celebrated Unity minister and author Eric Butterworth tells us, the exciting thing is that wherever you may be along the way of unfoldment and self-realization, no matter what the problems or challenges you may face, there is always more in you, the mystery of God in you, the Christ in you, which means your potential for healing, for overcoming, for prosperity. There is no limit. Join us each week for Discovering Eric Butterworth, Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Central Time with host Reverend Tom Thorpe, right here on Unity FM, the voice of an awakening world.
Do you think you know all you want to know about the characters in the Bible? Do you know who could be called the king who loved too much? Or what it means to be a Jezebel? Or that the best love story in the Bible begins with the declared commitment of two women? The Bible's symbolic meaning can help you transform your life and discover the presence and power of God within you. Find out what these characters can teach you about your own life today by tuning into Biblical Power for Your Life. Each week, co-hosts Reverends Karen Tudor and E.J. Niles present a Bible character from a historical, cultural, psychological, and symbolic perspective. Your comments and questions are part of this lively discussion. Tune in every Thursday at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, and power up your life, only at Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
Ever have those days when you think life isn't all that you thought it could be? Well, it's our thinking that creates the canvas of our life's masterpiece. When we are ready and willing to step into a new way of thinking, our world literally begins to shift and grow into something bigger and brighter than we ever imagined. Hi, I'm Jamie Sanders, host of Spirituality Today here on the Unity Online Radio Network. Be sure to join us every Wednesday afternoon at 2 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Eastern to hear in-depth conversations with leading teachers, authors, and musicians in the world of spirituality and new thought. Listen in and open up. Spirituality Today, where life keeps getting better and better.
Inspiration only takes a moment. We invite you to consider these words from Unity author Charles Roth. Live deeply in the present moment. If you are going to work on the premise that real energy, real excitement, that feeling of being fully and enthusiastically alive comes from a source within you, then it follows that you have to spend some time getting acquainted, being at home in those far reaches of inner space. Peace is power, for out of stillness strength is born, and out of inner harmony productivity flourishes. Rest in that inner peace.
This meditative moment is brought to you by Unity.
What would a human life, based on the principles of an evolutionary spirituality, look like? Reverend Kelly Isola wants to talk with people of every faith or no faith at all, to passionately participate in the next great epic in the emergence of consciousness and culture. If the choice is ours to consciously evolve, then what can life look like at this pivotal time in human history? Join us each Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time for Spiraling Consciousness with host Reverend Kelly Isola, right here on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.